what it means to be Native. For me, what it means to be Native is to stand on the shoulders of my forebears, my grandparents, my father, everybody that came before me, that showed me by example, leading by example, and educating by example.
Spirituality, I always believed that there isn't enough evidence either way. So when there was people that would be like, there's no God, I'd be like, well, there's no evidence that says there isn't. So it's just as pig-headed to me to say that there is when there isn't. So I've always assumed that there was, but I never assumed that it's the typical Christian God or this or that. It would be something that is out of our understanding anyways. When I was 17, I crashed my car on the highway. I lost control on slush, and I flipped it over. And when I flipped it over upside down in a pond. When the car rolled over and I heard the broken glass, I also heard all rushing water come in. And I was underwater right away. It was all black because we were under the ice, and the seatbelt was keeping me in. There's been certain things that happened in my life that, like, it was last minute stuff, and it was the difference between tragedy and, oh, that was close. It was the darkness, complete black, because it was pond water. You couldn't see through it, so it was like you were in milk, and the ice and the cold, the shock right away of the cold almost makes you gasp. But I didn't have a time, because as soon as I was cold, I was underwater. The entire front of the car, the front seat and the passenger seat, was full of water, and the only place that there wasn't water was the car was upside down. We're sitting like upside down on an angle like that, so all this was underwater, and this piece was sticking out of the ice, but the rear window is where the air got trapped. So when I got there was enough air to be, but of course it wouldn't have been a lot of air for me to stay there, because eventually would have used it up. I never said any prayers or reached out and hoped that I was going to get saved somehow. I was starting to panic, so I was kicking and pushing and in that little moment there, I remembered a story my stepmother told me about people that were in a similar situation, flipped over a truck on the highway here, and they all drowned. In the midst of my panicking, I calmed right down, as if something come right over me, and I just went, clip, took the seatbelt off, kicked my way to the back of the car where there was an air pocket in the window, and I come up out of the air pocket, and I gained my bearings a little bit. It was all dark and that. The relief that came over me when I felt my head breach the water, the surface of the water, and I can stick my head up and get air. But in that moment, it was still black. It was dark all around me. I couldn't see anything. In that moment where everything was happening really fast, my mind slowed right down to the point where I could remember the story she told me about these two people passing away in a similar situation, realizing I was in a dire situation, and that kicking and flicking is not going to get me out of this. I had to think about it logically. So in that time, I slowed right down and was able to unclip myself. But what slowed me down? It can't just be my intuition or me thinking about it or having the story run through my head. Something had to be planted there. I was like, I don't believe that I came up with that calmness in that moment on my own. And when I tried to open the door, it brought up in ice, so I couldn't get it. But a little sheet of light came in. When I opened up the door, I could see light through the crack. And then I started working the door, and I ended up bending the side of the door up and crawling out through a little hole. I do believe there is something bigger than us. There are those loose end questions. They're like, okay, where did it all come from? Oh, it was built by evolution. I firmly believe it was built by evolution. We got the evidence in that. But that doesn't negate the fact that there might be a deity or a God. How couldn't evolution just be the tool of which they've created everything? So I've always been right in the middle, agnostic, I guess you would call it. When I bent the door open, I kind of like crawled out onto the ice. And as I got onto the ice, it was breaking because it was, I guess it was early winter, because I had just gotten my studded tires put on. And of course I thought I was invincible because I had 4 studded tires, but was proven wrong pretty quick then. My glasses were gone. I couldn't see anything. I was covered in bog water, so I was muddy and brown. And the first car that stopped was a brand new car. I was like, I'm full of bog water. I'm not going to sit in your brand new car to try and get warmed up. So she said, no, you can sit. I said, no, I'm not doing it. Second car showed up, old van, perfect. I'm going to sit in here and get warmed up. No heater. So I ended up getting a 20-minute ride to the nearest gas station with no heater, freezing to death in an old van.
So when you were underwater, anything come into your mind about, a higher power or anything like that?
The higher power, when I breached that water, the first thing I said, and I said this out loud, was, my parents are going to kill me. And then after that, you realize, they're going to just be happy that you're okay, type of thing. So for the higher power, yeah, that's what I looked to, was my parents. And I got to the nearest gas station, and covered in muck and that, and I had $1 so I called my dad, and I said, Dad, I'm going to have to get you to come get me. And he said, why is that? I said, well, I put my car upside down in the ditch. And he just went, oh, okay. Click. I was like, okay. I guess I just wait for Dad. Eh? When he got there, the concern on his face, I realized that the click wasn't anger; it was haste. So when he showed up, he was pretty concerned. But we're here. There's no place I would rather live than here, especially in here, being able to live just below my parents, and be able to help them out as they get older, and live in the community I grew up in, and the people that I went to school with, and everybody that's here. Then I like going and seeing other places, but not the same as living here.
A belief system that's almost inherent in me, that where I respect and use my families that come before me as inspiration to go further in my life, and to not be afraid to take on new challenges and do new things, and because they've done all those things before, and I've seen it by example. They've lived various lives of various trades and specialties around all over the world. So when I hear, what does it mean to you to be Native, I get a little confused, because living on a Native reserve my entire life and participating in culture and events around here and everything gave me a sense of what it is like to be Native. It really gives me a sense of being able to take on the world.